The buck stops, which comes from last night.
Yeah, we can't go beyond what Port Adelaide were able to do. That was absolutely compelling. We talk about the mental challenge and the emotional challenge, and you cannot ignore the build up of Gather Round, the build up from the final win of Port Adelaide last year against Hawthorn, and what that meant for this game. It had been put on the agenda. The AFL had scheduled it. It was the last game, as you said. It was the Premier's choice. And Port Adelaide handled that challenge so much better than Hawthorn did, which is the first time Hawthorn have lowered their colours in a situation like this since a third of the way through last year. They've been able to handle the emotion of it. But I thought that it's quintessential Kenny. It's quintessential Port, backs against the wall, a performance that no one expects them to be able to raise, and it was consolidated across the entire first half, and then when it mattered, just to put the game out of reach.
The buck stops for Victoria Police made for more search police careers. So it is reassuring on that front. That's been my major question with Port, is had they reduced Kenny's capacity to drive his team to produce that performance? Well, the answer to that is no. There it was before our eyes. It's a little... It drew on all. You could absolutely imagine what it was like in behind closed doors and how he would have wound them up like a top.
Yeah, well, and I think when you get the other side of it, the coach goes, well, yeah, we didn't really focus on it too much. It gets overplayed externally. But the tactical shifts were all to Port's advantage. Rosie off the back. And yes, he was standing next to Jack Inman for a while, but he had the Hawthorn tagger right there next to him and actually played on him for some of the night in Finn McGuinness. So it was like Port Adelaide were not going to run away from any of the challenges that were going to be thrown at them. They stared Hawthorn's strengths right in the eye and had obviously planned for and measured themselves against that and said, we're not going to sit back on our heels here and see what they're going to bring. We are going to take the game on and go straight at them. And that is a very Ken Hinkley manner to an attitude to take into a contest. And it's that combative attitude that has had Port Adelaide be a top four performer through home and away. It's just that last little bit that they... And maybe it's because they lack a little bit of the class to be able to finish in the end. And they have great class through the midfield, but maybe it's that little bit of class in the depth of their best 22 that stops them from being able to take those last steps in September. But when they put performances like that together, it's fairly compelling.
What did you think of the Rioli taunt?
Look, I thought that he's an abrasive player. And is this the double goal you're talking about? Or yeah, look, I thought Port Adelaide were under Hawthorn's skin from the get-go, and they were. There's no doubt they were affected. They were affected emotionally. That the game wasn't going the way they wanted it to, and in a blink of an eye, it was out of their hands. And then you've got to reconcile how you're going to handle this, and to recoup and come back in the second half was excellent. But yeah, no, they clearly won that the mental battle and the mental challenge. And Willie Rioli is, I think that's a big part of his makeup. He loves the contest. He loves to get in the face of his opposition, and he's got that. Once he can create that contest and have his direct opponent and those around him second guessing themselves and double thinking, that's when he takes advantage of those moments. He's pretty dangerous like that.
The buck stops, looking for a career that gives you more search police careers. Victoria Police made for more. So the flip side of it is, the big issue is, why didn't Hawthorn show up?
Well, that is the unanswerable, and Sam Mitchell said himself after the game, we're asking those questions and we'll work that out. He didn't seem as concerned about the emotional aspect of the game or the mental aspect of the game. He was more concerned about, all right, so what were the mechanics? Why were we not able to get our game going? There might be a bit of a template there. Like Port Adelaide were really hard man on man, and they were able to slow them down. They didn't give them the overlap, and traditionally teams have gone to zone, and you can pick your way through a zone defence if you've got a little bit of time and space. You've got really good users, and Hawthorn have that. And man to man has been when you know it's coming, you can move your opponents around and create the space that you need to be able to create that overlap. And once that overlap's created, it can be really difficult to stop. But Port Adelaide were able to keep foot on throat with Hawthorn. They weren't able to get any of their game going. So that hard man on man is a real question. Is it something that you need to get good at to beat Hawthorn? And we're looking at Hawthorn as a side who's going to be there at the pointy end. So you need to work out, okay, if they're going to be there, well, then we need to be good at this if we're going to be able to win the games that matter at the end of the year. Drew on Newcombe was clear, and with Day out of the side, Newcombe becomes a real target, and that's he's handled tags okay, but the Drew matchup was really good. The other one that Port Adelaide were prepared to do was under pressure. Whenever they quick kicked, it was always skinny, like always down the line. They were prepared to take the stoppage. They didn't want to give Hawthorn any rebound off the back half. So we'll see that happen more and more. And a little one that happened, they kept their forward skinny to handle those quick kicks down the line. But when they got a chance themselves to turn it over, and this is where Rosie was so important, they went out to fat side as quickly as they possibly could from a man-on-man defence, and they were able to cut Hawthorn in half quite often from end to end, and scored really heavily. So there's a couple of tactical things there that worked really well for Port Adelaide in the first half, in particular. That if you're Geelong, you're looking at that for Easter Monday, and that'll be a great litmus test for Hawthorn again. Can they respond and be more prepared for what might be thrown at them as the season progresses?
I thought Port exploited Sicily down back better than any team I've seen for a while, and the switch at halftime was more about is they had to get Sicily out of the back line. Maybe he's a more dangerous forward anyway, but the use of Pau Pepper, and it was really predetermined from almost the very first entry. That's where Port were going. That looked like just a little glimpse that I'm sure other groups would be looking at.
Yeah, well, when Pau Pepper's in that side and in that forward line, Port Adelaide are a completely different challenge. So there's some individuals on lists that when they're injured or when they're not there, they make a profound difference. Now, some of it's intangible. Some of it you can't measure on statistics. But Pau Pepper is a competitive animal. He welcomes the contest. He like Rioli, he can get under your skin, and he's not going to moderate his approach. He's bullet a gate, and he will keep coming no matter if the contest looks won or lost. He'll maintain his intensity and his energy. And I thought that contest of its own was probably a snapshot of what we saw throughout the first half. Sicily didn't have the game on his terms. Pau Pepper started, and he was the aggressor in the contest from the beginning. And Port Adelaide came out, punched Hawthorn on the nose, bloodied them straight up, and did not relent for the next 60 minutes. And the captain, the emotional leader of that team, the guy that in the end stood up and did really well in front of the ball. But yes, they were winners on every level, Port Adelaide, through that first half in particular, and Hawthorn had no answers. There's a lot of that, isn't it? There's a lot of post-analysis and, as you say, mate, snap judgments on why things have happened, and if we could all live in retrospect, we would make slightly different decisions, and things would look slightly different. There's no doubt you wouldn't allow some things that you might otherwise. But Hawthorn have been going about their business as well as any other team for the last 12 months. They've probably embraced, and Sam's spoken about this, embraced that sort of the personality of the playing group and the individuals within it, and allowing them to be them. You can get carried away with that a little bit, but geez, it's worked for them. So this might be a pause for thought and a consideration of, is this an event, or is it a pattern? It's clearly not a pattern. And as he said, 4-1, we're not in a bad position. So this is an event. And so unpacking this event and working out exactly what was it in the lead up, during, selection, tactics, emotion, our mental game, the physical preparation. They had the bye leading in. What was it that produced that first half or stopped us from being able to roll out what we've been rolling out consistently for a long period of time now? What did the opposition do? What can we learn from this? And then jump straight into Easter Monday. And that they've done it relatively well, Hawthorn. They've done it extremely well over the last 12 months. So, but this is a different scenario. We haven't seen them, not competitive like that. So 12 of the first 13 goals, Port Adelaide, 72 points up before half-time, and that's just not what you see. So Hawthorn's response will be instructive.
Nathan Buckley, how did Melbourne progress?
That's a fair question, isn't it? They don't look like a happy team. We spoke, Simon spoke about the love through the pre-season, but we're not seeing that. We're seeing a team that doesn't look happy, and the locker room mustn't be happy because we're not seeing the best of what Melbourne has available to it. There's a few out, Lever, McVee, who I think are really important for them off the back, but their outs don't explain the performances that we're seeing. There's some guns in that side that have been guns for a long time, and they can't find their best at the moment. It seems to me like they're caught between trying to evolve to play more modern football, but still staying true to their strengths. Their strengths are inside and contest, and the game is asking for more open field running and expansive use of the football, and they're caught in between. So 0 and 5 says to me that it's a failure of preparation in some shape or form through pre-season to find out how you're going to balance your absolute strengths, your Bulls, your Vineys and your Olivers who can't play anywhere else but inside. How do you take their strengths and give you the opportunity to play a more expansive brand of, I'm talking mainly around offense, a more expansive brand of offense without losing who you actually are. And so that's the challenge of every team. The forward concerns are still there, and they've been there for a long time. There's too much reliance on Frisch ahead of the ball. He can be a brilliant player, but he can go missing. Melksham's 33 years old, and I think that their forward line looks better when he's in it. He doesn't have to get a lot of the ball. He's just a smart, competitive player who has his teammates play better when he's in the team, but he's 33 years old. McDonald down back is looking good, and he's 32 years old. So I don't mind their young players. Like Lindsay's going to be a player. Langford's shown some real signs, even though he's got some developing to do. Windsor's run is great. Rivers and Sparrow have turned into probably different versions of inside players where they've a couple of years ago, they had unique strengths that we actually saw, and they were points of difference in the Melbourne team. But they're in a rut at the moment, and you can't just have like 15, 20-minute bursts of football. Everyone's doing that. West Coast is doing it. Richmond are doing it. So you need to be more consistent over 4 quarters, and to do that, you need to be happy. You need to be light. You need to be expressive, and at the moment, Melbourne haven't been that.
And their environment gets worse on that front. This is the tyranny of being 0 and 5. The president is already answering questions about the coach's tenure. The coach is fielding questions about whether he's capable of it. It's sort of all round. It runs counterintuitive to where they need to get to is the environment that they now live in.
It is, and it actually closes down the space. I think the main job of a senior coach, a leader in any environment, is to be the shepherder and the creator of space, to grow, to express, to feel, to be big in that. Like you want your individuals to feel like they can make mistakes, and you're not living in a scarcity mindset that like at the moment I can only imagine that Melbourne feel like every time they go forward we need to make the most of this because we're just not getting enough opportunities. And then when you feel like that, we're not going to make the most of your opportunities. So the difficulty that Simon Goodwin and the leadership at Melbourne have at the moment is that the space is going to close in. It's closed in already. And so how can you stay light in these situations? How can you have some enjoyment in the four walls through these situations? How can you pacify the competitiveness and want to win of a Petrarca, an Oliver, a Viney? What are the little wins in the next sort of 2-3 weeks that you're going to be able to put your flag in the ground out there and say, if we achieve that, well, then we're moving forward and that's a win for us. And it doesn't really matter what externally is said or done. It matters how we feel, what we want to achieve, and that we're moving towards it. And you've got to feel like you've got that positive momentum. It's a really difficult ask. It's not an easy thing to achieve, and it's a challenge you don't want to be. You don't want to be 0-5 with bereft of confidence or enjoyment and not playing your best. It's a really hard to turn around if you're an individual, let alone if you're a group of individuals that are trying to do it. And it's hard yards for the Ds.
Do you think they're capable of evolving that game style within season when it has been a long-term deficiency and now the game seems to have moved so far away from them?
Well, I think you can, but the question is, should you? Should you? I actually think that's always better to come back, and if you know yourself, then and you think that you can be the best version of yourselves, it's better than doing that than to pretend to try and be something that you're not. Maybe just keep six forwards forward. Like the game we saw against Geelong a couple of weeks ago, you put the extra number in at the stoppage, trying to improve clearance, didn't quite happen. You slowed down Geelong, which was great, but then you're trying to give yourself an extra number to kickstart some offense and run off the back, which I think was relatively effective. They had more inside 50s than Geelong, but then you're going one down in the forward half. Just make it a contest everywhere. If you're Melbourne, like you look at across your best 22, look at your list. Contest and clearance is your one wood. That's what you're good at. You've got big-bodied players that can win contests, whether it's in the air or on the ground. So make it a contest as much as you possibly can, and bring it back to your wheelhouse. Impose your style on the opposition. And people are saying you should be doing this, should be doing that. You got to get better here. The competition's asking for that. You run the show. Bring the games back to where you think you're at your best. Bring people into the trenches and see how you go then. And it might not be as sexy or as exciting as others want it to be, but I guarantee you, if you're winning games of footy, that's going to be more enjoyable than what's taking place at the moment.
And for the coach himself, how difficult, Bucks, is it to get to the point in round 5 when you're answering questions about your future?
Oh, it's a really difficult scenario to handle. Having been there myself, answering the questions about your tenure, answering the questions about why you're not performing at your best. There'll be reasons that Simon Goodwin will be aware of that he won't want to put on the agenda, that he won't want to table. There'll be players that he'll want to protect. There'll be others that he'll try and elevate. There'll be little pockets of improvement or light green shoots that he's trying to shine a light on. But it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to polish the proverbial when that's what's taking place. And in the end, you are on the ropes. You are on your heels, and you do feel like you're defending. And when you feel like you're defending, it's very hard to be proactive and aggressive and expressive, as I said. And so it's a tough situation. I mean, it takes, Simon Goodwin's manner, his demeanour and his words in the four walls are crucial, and he has to find a way of being as light as he possibly can, because if he's heavy, the whole place will be heavy, and it's really hard to do. But you've sort of nearly got to draw the line at the last 5 weeks. Have got to be done. Draw the line and then set something for the next month. You've got to have some little wins. It's not because you're not going to getting back into the season's a big ask. Sometimes it looks like it's just too hard. how are we going to do all that? We're going to put the crumbs out and create some little wins along the way and some energy and some enjoyment. We wouldn't be doing much competitive work at training. You just got to try and enjoy each other's company, try and make it as light and cheerful as you possibly can, because whatever has been taking place hasn't resulted in great team performance.
And this is where the setup is very unusual at Melbourne at the moment. So Simon Goodwin's a premiership coach, long-timer. Alan Richardson is similarly a long-termer. They are bound together. Each's successes belong to each other and each's failures belong to each other now as well. The chief executive seat is vacant and the president is only in place for this season. So that's not if you need, above all else, stability and surety, that's not an great environment to get that in at the moment.
No, and the coach himself is a party to some of those decisions, but what you can't ignore is that the buck stops with the senior coach. It always has, always will. And I think that the focus and the responsibility in the senior coach role can sometimes be it doesn't equate to where a club has got to. He always carries more of the burden than he rightfully should. But the situation Melbourne find, I think, as you've just detailed, it's a product of decisions that have been made, the wrong decisions that have been made, or decisions that haven't been made, and the can's been kicked down the road. And you can't fix all of that. Sometimes you've just got to go through the pain of, poor management or compliance at different times in the past, and you have to go back before you go forward. But I'm not fearful of Melbourne's long term. I think that they've made a lot of good decisions. It's just that the poor decisions at the moment are catching up with them, and maybe a couple of those is holding players to ransom and saying, well, they want to go, and you tried to convince them to stay. That alone can make the locker room an uncomfortable place. How do you handle that? And I'm talking out of school. I've no idea what it's like in there. But if players have voiced they want to leave, and for right or wrong they've stayed, or they've been asked to go around again against their will, that can have a profound impact on what happens to a football team and a football club. So that may or may not be the situation that we're looking at.
The pressure is squarely on Melbourne. Experience keyhole laser vision surgery at New Vision Clinics. Call 1800 20 20 20. The best bit of the weekend was at Norwood when the Lions flicked the switch. Actually, the whole game was brilliant. The environment was incredible. The Dogs were electric early, but when the Lions picked up the chase, that's the best footy we've seen so far this year.
And how good were the Dogs early, just quietly?
Yeah.
So the best bit comes from the challenge that was thrown at them, and to go the best part of 6 goals down, and to be able to find a way back. The fact that so 39 points down they were early in the third quarter, and then kicked 9 goals in a row from there. Eric Hipwood reprised Joe Danaher. So so the Lions fans are looking at that. Okay, well, we've still got a guy who can drag us back from the mire. I love Logan Morris's development and what he's doing. Archie's just an underrated gun, just gets it done. Rayner, if there's a player that can have less touches and higher impact, I don't know who it is. His impact on a game is profound. Bailey's doing his thing. McCluggage, Neal, the Ashcrofts, Dunkley, Berry through the midfield. They're just consistent, and their depth through there it's hard to get them. You might sit on Lockie Neal, but there'll be a couple of others that'll pop up. If I found Jasper Fletcher off the back, I think that's a great role for him. You get stuck on the wings, and you can run up and down on the wing, and you become a half a field player, and you're running on rails a lot. But Fletcher's got more to him than that, and we're seeing that now. You put a wingman off behind the ball, and all of a sudden he's got the full width of the field at his disposal, and we can start seeing a little bit more creativity. And so again, Chris Fagan's made some really good decisions on where to put his players. Charlie Cameron's impotent, and Kyle Lohmann's not there, and they're still finding a way. So they're compelling. But a word of caution:
Yes.
you can't go winning games off a quarter of footy. They're the reigning premier, and you can't just go into games thinking that you can flick a switch for 30 minutes and knock over your opposition. It might last for a period of time, but the Lions would want to put a four-quarter performance in really quickly, and it might be as soon as Easter Thursday against Collingwood.
The old school nature of it, I reckon, sort of fed into the footy. The environment played a role, and we got maybe 4 one-on-one duels, Sam Darcy versus Harris Andrews.
Yeah.
And you go, that's going to be, for as long as that lasts, let them play big finals against each other. That was a proper throwback. Isolated, get after it, best defender emerging forward.
Yeah, and that was one that we were definitely looking forward to. And the question's always been, like, Harris Andrews has often been deployed as the extra, so who can he drop off rather than who is he going to play on? But that did switch. It's the last 12 months, more and more Harris Andrews will go to the best, and he just knocks him over. And Sam Darcy, there's no greater challenge for a key back than Sam Darcy. And we got the couple of those one-on-ones, and they would have been 50-50 odd. I thought that they both sort of stood up and did, showed us their strengths really well, but Norwood was a good ground. There's a couple of cracking games there, and teams were able to find space and move the ball well. And there was a quirky one there. Like Bulldogs only had, they have 30 tackles for the game. They had a lot of the ball and they were scoring heavily, but they in a field that was pretty tight, and you didn't know if there was going to be a lot of space. They had 39 tackles for the game. There was quite expansive footy and attacking footy and high scoring football, and that's been consistent with the better sides early this year.
And the worst bit was the Harry Mackay concussion. For all that he'd gone through to get himself back on the field, for his day to end like that and end up in the concussion protocols, it was awful.
Yeah, I agree, and that's sometimes it doesn't rain, it pours, and Harry's had a really difficult beginning to the season. I thought he spoke wonderfully on their podcast late last week, and the courage to open up and to speak about that, and to sort of talk about his progression of acceptance of how he was feeling and letting people in and sharing that load. I mean, that's a great conversation. It's a great role model in terms of young people that are watching it, and I thought that was tremendously courageous. So disappointing for him not to sort of be able to play out 4 quarters. He was never going to be at his best. You sort of need to grind yourself through these situations at times after opening up about it to be able to get back to that light, aggressive, your very best, 9 out of 10 version of you. Harry might have fronted at a 5 or a 6 on the weekend. Just happens. Just unfortunate that happened. And the young Tommy Gross, that was an incidental contest. But yeah, it never rains, it pours, unfortunately, and it's going the wrong way because that's going to hold him back for another couple of weeks, maybe longer. Who knows? But yeah, we just want to see the people that are in our teams that you put a lot on the line. You're getting well remunerated, no doubt, but you put a lot on the line mentally, emotionally, physically. You want to see players have a chance to fill their boots and to go and be their best. But that's why the Cape is so difficult, because you don't often get that opportunity, and he'll get it soon enough, and Carlton need him as well.
Bucks, the unanswerable question: what could that do for Carlton?
Well, we'll find out. I wouldn't be reading too much into that game. That was one of the lowest pressure games that I can recall, and the end-to-end ball movement. It was nearly like 2 of every 3 rebounds went end-to-end for both sides. And it wasn't until West Coast sort of put the white flag up that Carlton were able to really run away with it. But I wouldn't be reading too much into that as a Carlton fan. You've got North next week, and then a tough run: Geelong, Adelaide, St Kilda, Sydney, GWS. I mean, that's where they're going to have to be ready to make their run.
And the curiosity is West Coast's leaders. There was a lot of that Eagles performance that frankly wasn't AFL standard.
No, and that is a massive concern for me. Like watching the game play out, Liam Duggan, who has been is one of the more experienced leaders there. He looked all at sea when he was dragged, deeper towards goal. Some of his contests just weren't good enough. Oscar Allen, has been well speculated on, but he's just not playing great footy. The contest isn't consistent. It isn't sustained. The guys that are having the biggest crack there are Liam Baker and Jack Graham, and they're newbies, and they're probably doing it out of respect for the coach because they've got an existing relationship. It's the gap and the dearth of leadership on field at that football club. I cannot fathom. I just cannot see where that is going to turn around. And we're talking about the mighty West Coast. It's unfathomable what they are putting forward. Less than 50%. When you look at their percentage, like they're uncompetitive on the in the ladder against an opposition and in the contest too often. I think that was the least that Horny sent me a text during the game. It ended up being the least number of contested possessions won since contested possessions have been taken as a stat, and that includes the shortened games through 2020.
Yeah.
So that just shows you there's some you can win a contest. It doesn't matter how inexperienced you are. It doesn't matter how how good the opposition are. You can go win contests, but that just wasn't happening.
So let's start with PFI and the Cats.
Yeah, well, I thought they were huge. That was a high quality game. High scoring, end to end. That was modern footy, played at its best, where both teams had so many weapons that were up and about and did damage. Did damage to the other. And for the Cats to respond to that, at 30 points up, 20 minutes into the second quarter, it looked like how far Adelaide. When they play their best footy, it's compelling. Like not many teams can go with them when they're so clean from the inside to the outside, and they've got the runners and they've got the targets forward of the ball that are just better than their direct opposition. Then they ask a real question. But then Geelong just found a way. The last sort of 5 minutes into half time, we're talking about on-field leadership with West Coast. You're going to find yourself in varied situations and scenarios on field. Now, there's a runner, and he can get out and give you, and you're holding up your seat. You can look across the interchange bench, and you can get a board. We're going to go seventh, or we want to, slow the game down. There's some control. There's some inputs from external to what's inside the line, but the players, the leaders in the moment need to make the right decisions and choose to be aggressive rather than go into their shell, choose to find and step up into these moments rather than step back. And Geelong were able to do that. And so they did that in that quick period leading into a couple of goals leading into half time, which gives them a little bit more impetus. All of a sudden, they're only a couple of goals away instead of 4. And Geelong's decisions over the last couple of years have been, the last 3 years, if we're going to make a blue here, we're going to make a blue being aggressive. We're going to make a blue trying to get the game into transition and open it up. And that was how they were able to get back.
And the Patrick Dangerfield, Jeremy Cameron combination as power forwards decided the game in the final term.
Yeah, I suppose we were talking a little bit about Rayner with low touch, high impact. Danger's been a high possession getter through the middle in contests, but right now 16 touches and 4 goals. I think Geelong would take that output from him every week for the rest of the year. He's did some numbers on it. It's the 13th time he's kicked 4 goals or more. In the last 4 seasons, he's had 8 goals, 11 goals, and 8 goals in the entire year, and he's sitting on 11 goals at present. He was always scheduled. The Geelong's plan was to have him forward of the ball as much as they possibly could, and then get him into centre bounces as often as they could, and play a front half game. Like I ran into him on the Friday, and he's as fit as strong, as healthy as he's been. Clearly, when you come off a result like Thursday, individually and collectively, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. But he's unaffected. He's been a remarkable player over a long period of time. He kicked 45 goals in his second year at Geelong after winning the Brownlow the year before. And you wouldn't have thought that the last month he's put together is any less than that. So if he stays healthy, it'd be real interesting to see what he can put together this year.
Nathan Buckley, this was clearly Collingwood and the tactical masterclass on Friday night.
It was, wasn't it? And the numbers don't say necessarily how dominant Collingwood looked on the night. The clearances were relatively even, touches were relatively even. Sydney went inside 50 one more time than Collingwood did. But Sydney looked impotent in their ball use through the middle of the ground, and Collingwood just found space at will. And that was a structure battle, and it was a contest battle. And the inability of Sydney to be able to put chains of disposals together was due to Collingwood's placement of players, their attitude to how they handled low number situations through the midfield. So you might be in a 3v3. They were able to pressure with less players and then have an extra player in an intercept position down the field. And Sydney just couldn't use their extra number the way that they normally would. So outside of Heaney for most of the game, they really didn't have a winner across the field. And Collingwood just had them all over the place. Ned Long was huge. Nick Dacos just worked his way through the tag and into the game. The experienced players aside bottom, Pendlebury, Crisp. Perryman goes back behind the ball and they don't miss a beat. So they had 3 big outs and the 3 ins were huge. Long for his first full game. Sullivan was excellent. And Hoskin Elliott, who is just always there. The Swiss Army knife, as Fly calls him, can play in multiple roles, and they look like they were just solid. 4 quarters of really solid football that just put a pretty good opposition to bed, and they did it without really expending too much energy either, because they were so efficient in all phases of the game.
How big a moment in Nick Dacos' development is that sort of game? James Jordan's the best tagger in the game at the moment.
Yeah.
To be able to work through that and show them mode in which you're going to approach these things.
Yeah, I think that you are so reliant on, when you are getting tagged, you are so reliant on your team being able to win enough of the footy for you to be able to impact offensively. Nick Dacos gets knocked for apparently not running the other way. There was a chase down effort early in the match that was 20, 25 metres of solid work when it looked like a Sydney player was out, and he ran him down. So I don't think Nick picks and chooses. I think that he's a lightning rod for criticism because he's so consistently good. He does work in contests. He works between the lines. He works forward and he works back, and he's prepared to do the yards. He's prepared to put the grunt work in. His 1%ers are always really high. His chasing is really high. His pressure numbers are always really high. So I think it was evidence of his ability to work across the full game, the 4 quarters. Jordan really asks you a question, and he has periods where he can really lock players away, and he has done that successfully throughout 2025. But I think Nick's a beneficiary of his own work rate, but also of the fact that teammates around him were playing their roles really well also.
Nathan Buckley, what would you like to do with yours?
All right, I'll go from 4 up, and I'll let you know who's not in there. I think I'll declare that up front. I've left Collingwood out of the top 4, and Gold Coast, who haven't lost a game, will not be in my top 4 this week. And they've got play-in games in the next 2 or 3 weeks, both of those teams. I've got GWS at 4. I just think that the quality of their opposition and the consistency of performances, they're scoring heavily and they're not getting scored against. So their balance of offence and defence, their front 6 and back 6 is looking really good. So I've got them at 4. I've got Geelong at 3 on the basis of their victory against Adelaide and how it came about. So they've played themselves back into the top 4. and have a match up against the second seed in Hawthorn, who lowered their colours for the first time for quite a while. So they've come back a peg based off that performance. But Easter Monday proves to be a fascinating viewing. And I think the reigning premiers in Brisbane have earned their number one seed back for me. And as I said, they're playing consistently enough, but their bursts are pretty impressive at the moment. It's how they got over the line at the end of last year to become premiers, and they're going about it the same way at the moment.
Yes, Geelong won my play-in game, so they move into 4, displacing Adelaide. I've bumped Hawthorn from 1 to 3, and the Giants are up to 2, and the Brisbane Lions are the 1 seed.
You can drop 2 spots.
Yep. If you go 70-something points down, you can get marked down a fair way. But
there's a few question marks.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit like, I wanted Hawthorn and Geelong side by side. So you've got them 2-3, I've got them 3-4, which all sets up perfectly.
I nearly put Collingwood in at 4, so I had one play 4 and 2v3.
See, but that would have been it.
No, but GWS, they definitely need to be in there.